If we compare the history of human civilization to a long river, then around 1700 BCE, it was undoubtedly an age sparkling with brilliant stars. On the Mesopotamian plains, King Hammurabi of Babylon had just inscribed his famous Code of Laws. And along the Nile, the ancient Egyptians prayed beneath the shadows of pyramids for the eternal life of their pharaohs. But what about Europe at this time? In many people's stereotypical view, the glory of ancient Rome would not arrive until 1,000 years later, and the Acropolis of Athens had not even laid its first foundation stone. Europe in 1700 BCE seems as though it should have been a barren, primitive, and dark continent. However, the truth of history is often more astonishing than myth.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Lindsay Winden channel. Today, with the help of cutting-edge AI digital reconstruction technology, we will peel back the mists of 3,700 years of history. Here, you will witness the very first light of European civilization, the earliest civilization in Europe,
the Minoan civilization. Before we talk about this incredible palace, we must first awaken a terrifying memory buried deep within the DNA of Europeans. In ancient Greek mythology, King Minos of Crete offended Poseidon, the god of the sea. As punishment, his queen gave birth to a bloodthirsty monster, the Minotaur. To conceal this scandal, the king ordered the master craftsman Daedalus to build an extremely complex underground labyrinth to imprison the beast within it. Every year, the Athenians were forced to send 7 boys and 7 girls as sacrifices to the monster until Prince Theseus of Athens, with the help of the thread of fate given by the Cretan princess, entered the labyrinth and slew the beast. For thousands of years, people believed this was merely a myth meant to frighten children. After all, who would believe that such a vast labyrinth, capable of making people lose their way, truly existed? Until 1900, a British archaeologist named Arthur Evans arrived on the island of Crete with a shovel in hand. As layers of soil were peeled away, an astonishing sight emerged before the world. Evans did not uncover the bones of the Minotaur, but instead unearthed a massive complex covering nearly 20,000 square meters. The palace was built along the hillside, with over 1,000 rooms intricately arranged together. Corridors twisted and turned, staircases rose and fell unpredictably, and dead ends and hidden passages were everywhere. Let alone outsiders, even the palace attendants living inside, if unfamiliar with the layout, could easily lose their way. Later Greeks who came here, upon seeing these vast ruins resembling a labyrinth, felt both awe and fear intertwined. And thus the myth of the Minotaur's labyrinth was born. They misunderstood history, but their amazement at the complexity of this structure was entirely justified. When AI engines reconstruct and render the blueprints of this structure from over 3,000 years ago, we finally understand that Knossos was far more than just a place to live. It was an almost audacious display of architectural mastery in the early history of humanity. If the pyramids of ancient Egypt were solemn monuments dedicated to the dead, then the Palace of Knossos was undoubtedly a sunlit paradise built for the living. When AI fully reconstructs this city of 1700 BCE before our eyes, historians all notice a highly unusual detail. This immensely wealthy capital had no defensive walls whatsoever. In the Bronze Age, an era defined by brutal conquest and survival of the fittest, not building walls was practically equivalent to suicide. Why would they dare to do this? Because the Minoans possessed the most powerful invisible walls in the world at the time, an invincible fleet that dominated the entire Mediterranean. Their advanced shipbuilding and seafaring skills gave them absolute control of the seas, while enemy infantry struggled across land.
Minoan warships had already formed the strongest line of defense at sea. This centuries-long peace brought by maritime dominance is known in history as the Pax Minoica. This allowed them to redirect the immense wealth that would have been spent on fortifications entirely toward the pursuit of an exquisite way of life. As you stroll through the central courtyard of Knossos, the first thing that will strike you are these visually striking columns. Look closely. Their shafts are ochre red, their capitals black, creating a dramatic contrast of color. Even more unusual, they are wider at the top and narrower at the bottom, the exact opposite of the marble columns in later Greek temples. Why were the columns inverted like this? Because Crete lies in an earthquake zone. The ingenious Minoan craftsmen discovered that by inverting cypress trunks to serve as columns, they could prevent the natural upward growth of sap and sprouting. And this top, heavy structure also provided greater flexibility and shock absorption during earthquakes. 3,700 years before reinforced concrete, they had already pushed seismic design to its limits. But this is not yet the most astonishing feature of Knossos. As a massive complex with over 1,000 rooms and up to 4 or 5 stories, how did they solve lighting and ventilation? The Minoans invented light wells and folding door systems. Through cleverly designed courtyards, sunlight could reach even the lowest rooms, and rows of wooden doors that could be freely opened or closed allowed them to regulate sunlight according to the seasons, and guided sea breezes through the interior spaces. Yes, you heard that right. More than 3,000 years ago, the Minoans were already using a natural central air conditioning system. If the structures above ground showcased Minoan artistic taste, then the underground systems reveal a level of technology that feels almost time-traveling. When we excavate beneath Knossos today, we discover an incredibly complex modern-grade drainage system that rivals even those of 19th century Europe. Look at these terracotta pipes, each about 70 centimeters long. They were designed in a conical shape, with one end wider and the other narrower, fitting perfectly together. Why design them this way? Because when water flows through a narrowing pipe, its pressure increases. This principle of modern fluid dynamics was used by the Minoans to automatically flush sediment from the pipes, perfectly solving the age-old problem of blockages. Now, prepare yourself. Deep within the Queen's quarters, archaeologists discovered a pit with a wooden seat, directly connected to a flowing underground channel. Beside it, there was even a water reservoir. This is the earliest known flushing toilet in human history. Imagine sitting in the Palace of Knossos in 1700 BCE, enjoying the breeze and sunlight and flushing the toilet. Now imagine this, over 3,000 years later, in the Palace of Versailles in France. Perfume-drenched European nobles were still relieving themselves anywhere they could. This immense historical contrast, how could it not inspire deep awe for this enigmatic civilization? Advanced technology and abundant wealth freed the Minoans from the anxieties of survival. So what kind of spiritual world did these ancient Europeans, who pondered life even on flushing toilets, possess? In this warless paradise, why were men and women performing deadly acrobatics atop charging bulls? If you were to ask, what color was Crete in 1700 BCE? The answer lies on these walls, now reawakened by AI. The Minoans were true masters, and they mastered a technique known as buon fresco. The artisans had to work before the plaster fully dried, applying natural mineral pigments swiftly and precisely. As the moisture seeped in, the pigments bonded with the wall itself. It was this race against time that allowed these colors to survive 3,700 years of darkness, remaining as vivid as ever.
Walking through the corridors of Knossos, you feel as though you've entered a prehistoric modern art gallery. Look at the people in these paintings. They have impossibly slender waists, both men and women alike, wear elaborate curled hairstyles, and are adorned with exquisite gold jewelry. In 1900, when archaeologist Arthur Evans first uncovered this female fresco, the entire European academic world was astonished. The woman in the painting wears vivid lipstick with heavy eye makeup, her expression confident, languid, and captivating. French scholars at the time exclaimed, "How could this be a woman from over 3,000 years ago? She looks like a modern lady who just walked out of the champs. Fusai Lises yesterday." This astonishment gave the fresco its name, La Parisienne. Behind the confident red lips of La Parisienne lies one of the most astonishing secrets of Minoan civilization. This was a society that deeply respected women, perhaps even one led by matriarchal structures. In contemporary Egypt or Babylon, frescoes focused on kings, conquest, the glory of killing, and the ruthless domination of slaves. Yet in the thousands of square meters of frescoes at Knossos, you will not find a single depiction of war, slaughter, or rulers flaunting power. What do we see in the Queen's chambers? The deep blue sea and dolphins joyfully leaping out of the water, colorful fish, and young girls gathering saffron in the gardens. They did not worship bloodthirsty gods of war, nor erect imposing statues of kings. Their highest deities were goddesses representing the earth, fertility, and the forces of nature. This reverence for life, closeness to nature, and a peaceful, prosperous society gave rise to an ultimate form of romanticism. But if you think the Minoans were merely gentle hedonists, you would be completely mistaken, for beneath their romantic nature flowed a wild spirit that challenged the limits of life itself. This is the ultimate key to the origin of the Minotaur myth, bull, leaping. This was not merely a performance, but the most sacred and daring ritual in Minoan society. Look at this image. A raging bull charges forward. On the left, a figure fearlessly confronts it, grabbing its sharp horns. Using the violent upward thrust of the bull's head, the figure in the center is launched into the air, performing a perfect backflip over its back. While on the right, another stands ready, arms outstretched to catch the landing performer. This was undoubtedly one of the deadliest extreme sports in human history. Any slight mistake could result in being gored and killed instantly. Even more astonishing, according to the Minoan artistic convention of men in red, women in white. The light-skinned figures grabbing the horns and assisting are women. Yes, 3,700 years ago, Minoan women were not confined to private quarters. They stood alongside men in full public view, dancing with bulls, the embodiment of untamed natural force. When the ancient Greeks saw these frescoes and heard tales of humans confronting bulls, they could not comprehend this life and death ritual ecstasy, so they transformed these brave bull leapers into innocent youths sacrificed to the Minotaur, and reimagined this vibrant, joyful palace as a dark labyrinth imprisoning a monster. In absolute prosperity and peace, the Minoans turned life into art, and art into belief. They believed as long as the sea endured, this vibrant utopia would last forever. However, deep beneath the Mediterranean, a terrifying force capable of destroying everything was quietly awakening in the darkness. The Minoans entrusted their fate completely to the gentle Aegean Sea. They believed that as long as they possessed this invincible fleet, as long as the sea remained generous, the unwalled prosperity of Knossos would endure forever. However, they did not realize that the sea's gentleness was only an illusion. Beneath this calm blue surface lurked a prehistoric force far more terrifying than the Minotaur of myth. Time moves to around 1600 BCE. The Minoans were living through an ordinary summer day. Women wove in the courtyards, while merchants counted gold arriving from Egypt at the harbor. Suddenly, the earth began to shake violently. On the distant horizon, in the direction of Thera, a massive column of black ash shot straight into the stratosphere. It was the deadly roar of the earth itself. Billions of tons of ash and debris were hurled into the sky, instantly blotting out the sun. The entire eastern Mediterranean was plunged into prolonged darkness. But for Knossos, the true catastrophe did not come from the sky, but from the very sea they trusted most. As the volcano collapsed and seawater rushed inward, a super tsunami, tens of meters high, was born. This wall of water surged forward with unstoppable force, slamming into the northern coast of Crete. In that instant, the proud Minoan harbors were torn apart, and the great trading ships that once dominated the Mediterranean were tossed into the air like toys and shattered into pieces. The Minoan invisible walls before the power of nature vanished in an instant. Without the protection of their fleet, Crete became a defenseless, isolated island. Ash buried the farmlands, bringing years of famine and disease. This civilization that once turned life into art and cherished peace was weakened to the brink. The laws of history are often cruel. In the decades after the disaster, the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece seized the opportunity to invade. They were warriors who valued strength and conquest. Facing the defenseless Minoans, they showed no mercy. Fire ultimately consumed the Palace of Knossos. The elegant linear script was abandoned, and the vibrant marine frescoes were replaced by rough depictions of chariots and war. The first light of European civilization was extinguished amid the convergence of natural disaster and human violence, fading away in tragedy. Some say this catastrophic end of Minoan civilization inspired Plato's legend of Atlantis, the lost city beneath the sea. They created wonders only to fall like a shooting star, leaving behind, in Greek memory, a distorted tale of labyrinths and monsters. Today, in the 21st century, using cutting-edge AI technology to reconstruct this ancient palace of 1700 BCE, it feels like a dialogue between technology and art across 3,700 years. They used brilliance and imagination to build flushing toilets and earthquake-resistant red columns. We use computation and code to piece together their forgotten world. Time may destroy mighty cities and tsunamis may swallow invincible fleets, but the pursuit of beauty and the graceful celebration of life have already become part of the genetic code of civilization, forever etched into the river of human history. This is Knossos, the childhood of European civilization, a world without walls, yet filled with the vastness of the sea and the promise of the stars.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.